Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello everybody, welcome in Gorilla Sports Off Ice. We are not in the Gorilla Sports studio. We are here at Family Sports Abs practice facility. Their practice wrapped up just a little bit, I was gonna say a little bit long ago, a while ago, a long time ago. This is off to such a horrible start. A while ago, the Abs finished up practice. We heard from Jared Bednar, and then Megan and I sat down. We had a fun interview this afternoon that you guys will all get to see next week. But I am Jesse Montano. She's Meghan Angley. Megan, it's Friday. It was 80 degrees yesterday. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Lots of sunshine this week, great weather, and a really fun practice day ahead of a huge game tomorrow. Another afternoon one, always a little bit weird, but the Abs are cooking right now, so I think I'm still riding a little bit of the high of the post-game from last night. I was pretty hyped about that.
It was a fun one. You know, you and I were talking off camera year before this, and just like that was a fun game last night. Because of the implications of all of it, and these are the two hottest teams in the league, you know, in the last month, what LA is doing this year, they look really determined to finally buck the trend of getting, you know, walked out of the playoffs every first round by Edmonton. And so for the Avs to come out and put together the effort that they did last night, you know, Jared Bednar said after the game that start to finish, that was the best game they've played in a while. And that says something because of how well they've played recently.
I liked, too, specifically, it was one of their best defensive games in a while. And against a good defensive team with depth down the middle in LA, who I hold in very high regard in that sense, doesn't always make for the most interesting hockey. But it says a lot about the Avs then and how they're able to match up against that and put four past this good defensively LA team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was an impressive effort from my perspective last night. And something that I think can be a real confidence booster for that group. Not that, as you know, you and I kind of learned today, not that this group is lacking a ton of confidence right now, but yeah, just to be able to have that feather to put in your cap of, nope, that's a team that also has aspirations of making a deep run, and not only did we play a strong game against them, but we kind of took it to them for large portions of that game. That's just got to be something when you go home last night, you know, if you're Jared Bednar or any of the players even, and you put your head down on the pillow, that's got to be one that you're feeling like, okay, we might have something special here, like we've been hearing a lot recently.
Certainly, because of the quality of competition. I think they've played a mix of teams lately, but there have been good teams that they have beat. And they're finding ways to win no matter the opponent. That's going to be huge down the line because they don't necessarily get to choose. And they're going to be going best on best in a playoff situation. And similarly, the strength of what I liked about last night is how repeatable it is because you look at the utilization across the board, it's pretty equal. And so you're not looking at Nathan MacKinnon and feeling this could really wear him down in a 7-game series. Everybody's chipping in different ways. You know, it's a solid penalty kill that you hope isn't tested as much in the playoffs, but they held their own. I know LA's power play isn't necessarily the most lethal around, but those reps matter. This is a penalty kill that I think has been good all year. They got the goaltending to support it. I think they have a depth of players that can chip in on it, and that was necessary last night. Yeah. They held their own. Mackenzie Blackwood, a huge part in this conversation too, continues to hold his own. And then the goal support. That was sort of the missing piece in the equation at times earlier in the year when these other parts had come together a little bit more, because this is a lineup that doesn't have a Josh Manson, and Kiviranta is just a little bit banged up right now. And so the depth of this team post-deadline is being tested right now, and you don't notice a difference. They're still strong and dominant and feel complete as a team.
I love what you... Not only the repeatable part of what you're talking about, but the okay, this doesn't feel like something that's going to wear Nathan MacKinnon down over the course of the playoffs. And look, we're still not that far removed, so I think it's still fair to talk about it, and especially the way this team is starting to come together. It's easy to draw the comparables to the team 3 years ago. And one of the things that I remember so much about Nathan MacKinnon on that run is if you asked, just the average observer, I think there was a lot of people that felt like Nathan MacKinnon had a quiet playoff run in the year that they ran to the Cup. For the most part, obviously he had the game against St. Louis and things like that where he was popping off the ice, but people kind of felt like he had this kind of understated. He was never really part of the conversation for Conn Smythe. It was always pretty clear that was going to be Cale, and then you talk to Jared Bednar after the playoffs about Nathan MacKinnon, and Jared Bednar to this day says, I think that's the best hockey I've ever seen Nathan MacKinnon play. It was the most complete we've ever seen him play. His 200-foot game was elite. And there was so much of that again, just it felt from game to game over the course of that playoffs run, it all felt repeatable. And it all felt like something where it's like, yeah, you don't need Nathan MacKinnon to go out there and dominate the game start to finish to come away with dominating wins or comfortable wins. And I think the fact that, what you just pointed out there, the fact they've built this team this year, I think maybe with a little bit of that in mind of, okay, that was the key back then, was not necessarily like direct support on Nathan MacKinnon's line, but how can we support Nathan MacKinnon in making sure that our most valuable asset is being put in a position to be successful and is being put in a position to play at the level that he expects of himself for a sustained amount of time. It feels like that's very deliberate with the way that they put this team together at the deadline.
It's built to last in terms of the depth.
Great way of putting it. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because behind a Kiviranta is a Jimmy Vesey and a Miles Wood, who they paid a lot of money and gave term to be a regular lineup guy. It's kind of crazy that we're in this room, and I understand if people feel a little uncomfy by it, but it also points to just how deep this team is now that they can make those types of decisions. I even look at Logan O'Connor, who used the word disappointed to talk about being pulled out of the lineup to get guys like this in games, staying fresh as we approach this final stretch of the regular season. Look, that is important. You want these guys to be fresh because if they did encounter injuries in the playoffs, you don't want them to have last played hockey 3 months ago. It's important for Miles Wood and Jimmy Vesey to get in games. And it did come at the expense of some of the success that has been found on that fourth line with Parker Kelly and Logan O'Connor alongside Drury. But Logan O'Connor is making his minutes count when he is playing. And I think all of that is good for the bottom line because of that depth. You do feel a little weird paying that much money to Miles Wood, but it could be really important in the playoffs. We saw the injuries crop up on that 2022 team. And so players like, Bowen Byram became hugely important when they were without a Sam Girard. And that's what I like about this team right now is they're without a Josh Manson and Eric Johnson, a little banged up. So Keaton Middleton's getting in games. And Sam Alinsky's being elevated. And Sam Girard continues to quietly be maybe an underappreciated aspect of this team. Taze McCarr,
in my opinion.
Wonderful as always. Not a new conversation. But it's good to see that happening too in this final stretch of the regular season because I think these are the kind of storylines they draw upon down the line when the circumstances might be a little bit outside of their control, and they're controlling it right now. I even want to pull back to earlier in the season when we talked about the top of this lineup being predictable, particularly on the power play.
Yep.
There was this fear that the rest of the league has solved the Avs. They figured out how they play their game and how to defend it, to take away time and space so that they can't use their speed to get up ice and establish the zone. The Avs are overpassing. They were making this easy to predict. Now we're in this room, though, where they've gotten a few new players into the fold with Netchus as part of that top six, Brock Nelson, obviously, so it gives them a little bit of a different look. But I also think they've returned to this place of no matter who the team is that has a good game plan and how to shut down what the Avs do well as a team, they're in such a place of strength that they're still able to play their game the Avalanche hockey way.
Yeah.
And that's what I take away from last night against a good defensively LA team, that the Avs looked like the dominant Avs. They made the LA Kings look kind of pedestrian. And that's where I look at the strength of this team too. It's not necessarily the depth that I'm shouting out here. It's the Avs have returned to what they do best so that no matter the quality of competition, they're going to play Avalanche hockey whether they like it or not.
All right, I've got you. There's several things that you brought up there that I want to touch on, and I'll start right there. One of the hallmarks of the 2022 team, and you're probably sick of hearing me talk about this because I've talked to you about it for the last 4 years.
No, I love it.
Is they could play however you wanted to play.
Yeah.
You want to hit? Cool. We can play physical. We'll play heavy on the walls. You want to race up and down? Well, you're going to lose that, but we'll do that with you too. You want to trap in the neutral zone? Cool. We can slow it down and play methodical and dissect you and take advantage of seams and things like that. They almost it almost felt like 3 years ago that they almost kind of let other teams like, no. How do you guys want to play?
Yeah, show me how you want to approach this.
We'll beat you at whatever it is you want to do, but no, you guys dictate. You guys set the pace. Oh, okay, no, we're better at that than you. And it feels like this team, maybe it's not quite there to that level, but like you said, they seem to be so much better about being able to dictate the way that they want to play, and there isn't just one way to shut this group down. And there's just more. I don't know if there's how to say this the right way. It's more dynamic. It's not so stagnant, not so predictable. I even heard on the broadcast last night them talking about that first power play unit. And suddenly you've got 3 righties out there who are all crazy threats to shoot. And it just, suddenly Nathan McKinnon's drifted into the middle. So that's where everyone starts looking. And Marty Netchis is wide open for a one-time. Like they've just added so many layers to what they can do. And then on top of that, because you're right, like the LA Kings are deep down the middle. And like that's one of the few teams that you look at, ooh, wow, that's another team that 1, 2, 3 matches up pretty well with the Avs, and it's where the Nathan McKinnon and Cale Makar cheat code just kind of kicks in, because it's like, yeah, you can match down the middle, and Andrei Kopitar is really good, but he's not Nathan McKinnon, and so you've really got not to take a side swipe at Ryan Johansson, but when Ryan Johansson came in last year and he made the comment of, well, I've been a 1C my whole career. Now I just get to, go keep doing that because there's a 1+ in front of me. No. Now the Avs actually have Brock Nelson, who has been a 1C for a large portion of his career, slotted in on the second line. Jonathan Drouin talked to us yesterday about Charlie Coyle and saying the fact that we have Charlie Coyle as a third line center is such a luxury. So, it's just, you're right. Like they can dictate the way they want to play and just the way they match up. The other 2 things I wanted to touch on were Logan O'Connor and Sam Malinsky. Logan O'Connor told us that he was disappointed coming out of the lineup, and you and I both told each other after the fact that we were surprised by the honesty of like, wow, he was really straightforward about that. Like, no, he didn't say pissed, but like, no, I'm disappointed. I want to be in the lineup. I feel like he's had a different intensity to him since that first scratch. And I felt like that kind of bore itself out last night, the way he was playing. And even the empty netter that he puts in is just, there's a little bit of extra stank on it. You know what I mean? Like, as he put that one in the net, and you could tell that it felt good. And I think that's only good for the Avs if you have those guys at the bottom who are revved up like that.
Right.
And then the last part, sorry, I know this is long-winded, but the last thing I wanted to, you mentioned Bowen Byram's importance. That's the other thing that people forget. I saw a tweet last night of like, who would win, the 2022 Avs or these Avs? I think this is a great team. It's the 2022 Avs. You won that Stanley Cup having Andre Burakovsky. He's a 60-plus point guy as a healthy scratch. You won that Stanley Cup without Sam Girard. That team from a few years ago was, I think one of the best teams the league has seen in a generation. Like that was a really good team. But with the way that Sam Malinsky is playing, and Jared Bednar even talked about him today, he has the potential to be a little bit of that 2022 Bowen Byram-esque, not saying he's going to be Bowen Byram, but Bowen Byram-esque impact of like, here's a young kid that is playing well beyond his years in terms of importance. No,
it's true, and I think that's the benefit of Malinsky too. Being a little bit older, new to the league, so getting those reps newly, but having a bit of the maturity to him as a player, I think helps, because that's how I think he's able to mentally reset over the Four Nations break. I think younger players maybe would have grappled with that as more of a challenge. And for him, he's able to turn that page and come out of the Four Nations break playing excellent hockey in both ends. He sort of returned to the things that rewarded him in college, which is incredible because that is where so much of his strength lies. But I love what he's doing in his own end too. we've talked about this play that Cale Makar kind of does, the stop and start along the wall that can be a bit deceptive. And since we've talked about it, I've noticed it more and more from Malinsky. And so in his own end, he is able to gap up on players using that and sometimes evade them and break out the puck successfully as a result of that. And so it's a combination then of using his physicality too in instances where he might absorb a little contact to initially make that play, but he's going to outsmart his opponent. And similarly, what he's doing up ice in the offensive zone is exactly why the Avs had interest in him. He plays such an Avalanche style of hockey. There's so many players we compare him to, right? Like his hockey IQ in his own end reminds me of Devon Taves a little bit in opting for the stick defensive play instead of just playing the body each time. And then in the offensive zone, there's a little bit of Bowen Byram and Cale Makar. I don't even know, right? At this point, I'm getting carried away.
No. I don't think you are. I've always said, even going back to when he was first breaking in with the Eagles and you and I were, kind of bullish on him, I've always thought, like, he's got some Cale Makar in him. He's not Cale Makar. Cale Makar is in a different stratosphere from any other defenseman in the NHL. I used to think, up until, probably about a year ago, I used to think it was Cale Makar and Victor Hedman, then everyone else. I think it's Cale Makar, then everyone else. Sam Malinsky has that creativity. And again, he told you and I earlier this year, big part of the reason I chose to come here is because I want to model my game off of what Cale Makar does, and what better way to learn than playing alongside him.
He successfully split 2 defenders entering LA zone alone, and he ran out of runway, so he didn't have an option at the end of it, which made it a little less cool. But it's the speed and the decision making that grants him that type of opportunity. And out of the first period, because LA did slow the Avs at the start of this game, and so it did take Logan O'Connor's goal kind of opening it up for them, because before that it was a little bit slow and their chances were limited. But I make a mental note that the shots leaders coming out of that kind of slow first period, Sam Malinsky's at the top of the pack with a few other players who also registered 2 shots. And I think that's where you see the difference in his game, that he is a little bit more confident to just shoot the puck, and he is activating and getting up ice and being more involved in that end while still taking care of things in his own end. And that's where I've seen such huge growth, and I think it's earned a lot of trust with Bednar too. That will go a long way in the playoffs, because as we've seen with Bednar in players like even a Byram and a Newhook, the trust doesn't come easily for young or inexperienced players. But I think Malinsky has done so much good for himself, especially with what he's done out of the break.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And we've even heard that praise from guys like Ryan Lindgren, and he talking about Sam Malinsky's learning and making the right decisions. And I think while I actually do agree to an extent with Nathan McKinnon's comment a couple weeks ago of you can't win with kids, I think having a guy like Sam Malinsky, who's older, he's not a traditional rookie in that sense, but someone who can be a little bit, more cost effective and be able to have a legitimate impact on the bottom part of your lineup. And then you just use the word trust. Jared Bednar said that he thinks that this current stretch right now for Sam Malinsky is his best hockey in the NHL so far. And that, if you're showing that you can dial up your play to match the intensity of not only this time of year, but a game like last night, where, like you said, he's kind of someone who's part of being a difference maker early on and helping to generate some offense, that's going to go a long way. And then the last thing that I want to add, off what you just said of a little bit of a slower start. Once the Avs kind of find a way to break through, they were able to get going. Well, that is something that we see a lot of teams do. Dallas last year in the playoffs, slow the Avs down, make them chase, make them play from behind, make them play our style real slow. When you're a team trying to play like that and suddenly you are behind, well, you have to open things up a bit and you've got to push up ice, and it takes away from that ability to just slog things down and try to take away the offense. And where I think the Avs' depth is going to help them with that so much this year is with the way that Jared Bednar is able to deploy these lines right now. It's just wave after wave after wave after wave of guys that are wanting to get up and go and play north and play with speed. And it gets hard and it wears you down. And even when their fourth line is out there kind of grinding you out with that style, it just makes it harder to keep the Avs at bay so that you can keep playing the way that you want to for longer. If the Avs are able to have nights like last night where, yeah, you're getting depth contributions to push the team into a lead without having to be Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, well, that's going to really help with the team being able to settle into the way that they want to play and not have to play this slow, methodical through the neutral zone style.
Yeah, you see it last night with the way LA defends their own blue line, the Avs' typical way of making an entry. It's not going to be as effective. And so when they make that entry, they're met with two bodies immediately. And so this is where players like Nathan MacKinnon maybe don't get enough credit, because sometimes it's Necas bringing the puck across the blue line and dumping it deep, and MacKinnon's the one racing below the goal line to retrieve it. And whether it's MacKinnon or Brock Nelson or Arturi Lehkonen, they're going to win those battles because they're not only going to get there first, but they're going to be strong on the puck too.
Yeah.
And they also can get a smart pass off. And so that's what's giving them the time and space to return now to the Avs game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe the entry didn't quite look like the entry they would like if it was Avs hockey perfectly their way, but they're going to make it their way.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the little examples too that I think players like MacKinnon don't get enough credit for the work that
Yes.
they're willing to do, and how a player like Necas, incredible game last night,
Yeah, he's outstanding.
helps the bottom line to open up the game for the Avs, because now they're not just solely reliant on MacKinnon for the entry. They've got a little bit more option in terms of speed, and the work is happening across the board, and that's what's helping them to find success.
Two things off that. One, Marty Necas, I thought he was great last night, and I saw some stuff probably about a week ago from some Hurricanes people online. They were like, oh, it's almost April. Has he disappeared yet? And, just did some digging, and Marty Necas is definitely a guy who has faced criticism in the past of, maybe not being hard-nosed enough and playing too much around the perimeter when things get really tough. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to benefit massively from being in this environment and this system. And, like you said, Nathan MacKinnon doesn't get enough credit for how hard he plays the game. And I just think that we're already seeing Marty Necas acclimate to that, and it's why his impact has been so has been so great since he arrived to Colorado. And then just you mentioned them being bigger and a little bit meaner and a little bit more difficult to play against. Well, that was something that, again, I remember being a big deal a couple of years ago, where they had this reputation a little bit of, oh, you can just get physical with them and it'll take them off their game. And I will never forget games 1 and games 2, watching the Predators run all over the ice trying to hit anybody they could. And it's like, yeah, and then there's one pass and they're gone. Like Nashville tried to hit their way into winning games and ended up getting swept and kind of embarrassed, in that first round series. And I almost wonder if there's a little bit of that growing again of like, oh, LA, we're the Kings. We just got to slow them down and get physical with them. But it's like, yeah, I don't know if you're going to do that. If it's the first line, if it's not Nathan MacKinnon, it's Val Nichushkin. If it's not that line, it's the second line with Brock Nelson and Arturi Lehkonen. If it's not those guys, it's Charlie Coyle and Ross Colton. And if it's not those guys, it's Logan O'Connor and I did not name one player there who is easy to play against. And I do wonder if that reputation has crept back into the league of like, oh, if you can just body him up and shut down that top line, you're going to be good. And I think teams are going to be in for a surprise.
I think it translates to both ends too. I think that was what stopped Dallas in the Mikko Rantanen return game. They had trouble creating in Colorado's end because Colorado limited their chances by being smart defensively, but also choosing their assignments carefully and being aggressive in their coverage in their own end. And I look at against LA how the goal scoring is opened up by Logan O'Connor stripping the puck along the wall.
Yeah.
You're talking about line by line, and you see the threat at the top of the lineup. Maybe teams underestimate the fact that maybe that fourth line isn't going to score on every shift, but they're going to take the puck away from you if they can. It's going to be really hard to play against them, as you say.
Well, in conversation we had today, it's hard to play against a team that has the puck all the time. And that's the other thing that I think that maybe Logan O'Connor and his group don't get enough credit for is they just end up with the puck on their stick a lot.
Yeah.
As a result of kind of what you're talking about, of just being that they're just all over you. You can't get away from them. And that's just another element to it. Like you said, they're not going to score all the time, but they're going to have the puck on their
Yeah.
stick a lot more than you think.
They're going to take the puck away from you, and they're going to keep it from you. They're going to win battles to accomplish this too. So it's not going to be without some sort of physical toll that
Yeah.
must be paid.
Yeah, and I think you're going to be hard pressed to find a group that's deeper than that. Well, so I mean, all of that is observation. All that conversation we just had is based off observations that we made last night. This is the NHL's best team in the month of March, officially, as of last night, with them knocking off the LA Kings in the fashion that they did. They say you want to be peaking at the right time, and we still got a couple weeks to go here, and the Avs get a little bit of a break. They finish up their regular season on April 13th. Everyone else goes till the 16th or 17th, so they'll get a little bit of a break, and there's going to be a consistency element to all of this and being able to keep it going, but boy, Megan, it feels like the Avs are hitting their stride with this group at the right time, and it's leading to a lot of belief.
Yeah, I even look, it's not as if it's been perfect every step of the way, but they're getting the winning results because of the maturity of this group. You know, I'm sure they wished Montreal had ended a little differently. And similarly, Dallas. I'm sure they wished the Dallas game had ended a little bit differently so that it didn't result in overtime. That's now splitting points with the very guys you're trying to climb in the standings, in
Right.
the Dallas game at least.
Yep.
And you still look at the big picture of what this team is right now. Quietly haven't even mentioned Jonathan Drouin, 6 points in his last 5 games. You know, he stayed in the lineup and he continues to do things no matter where you put him. Whether he's on that second line, he's finding success there. Back with Nathan MacKinnon, he's finding success there. I think, too, the switch of putting him back on that top unit, it's completely changed the threat that is the man advantage. It's now both units. And so there's no relief for penalty kill units on any team. And I think it's going to be a sneaky secret weapon for this team in the playoffs that it doesn't matter what unit is on the ice. On the man advantage, the Avs are so dangerous right now.
And when was the last time that this team had that? As good as this team has been for, I mean, going back pre-pandemic, it's a running joke among media that it's earlier this season, the Avs were on a power play. Whistle blew with 1 second left in the power play, and the second unit went out. And I turned to Corey and I said, "See, Corey, the second unit gets time." And he and I were both laughing. That's how it's been here. We ride that top unit. It doesn't matter if they were just out there, if they've been out there the entire time. We're going with the top guys. Jared Bednar started the second power play unit on a man advantage last night. They pick up a goal. I think it was the game before. Like, there's so much more depth here than maybe even we realized immediately coming out of the deadline.
Yeah, because the conversation, I hate that it constantly goes here, but it's Netchess only finding success in Colorado because of Nathan MacKinnon. And look, there's a lot of reality around how Nathan MacKinnon elevates his teammates.
Right.
There's no denying that. But Netchess has a fantastic night. Some of that is power play success, but some of that too is second line success. And so I think that's where you don't want to take away credit from the individual players that are making this so dangerous too, right? So that is a Jonathan Drouin, that is a Martin Netchess, who are good in their own right. Similarly, Brock Nelson, Val Nichushkin, Arturi Lehkonen as well.
Yeah.
Another understated player having a career year.
Almost 30 goals, yeah.
It's no surprise, given the work, the opportunity too that he has now consistently in Colorado, but there's no mistaking that it's a player that just took it to another level this year too.
Yeah, especially in terms of his production. 9 games to go, Megan. They sit at 45 wins, trying to get back to the 50-win plateau for, I believe, it would be a 4th season in a row. And like you said, it's funny because they're 8-1-1 in their last 10. They've won 4 games in a row, but they are not making up any ground in the standings. Dallas has also won their last 4 games. We'll have a whole separate pod next week about how much I hate the playoff format. We can have that conversation again, but they're playing really good hockey right now, and it's fun to watch, and it's winning kind of cures everything, right? That's what we all talk about. And going back to even what you were talking about with the Montreal and Dallas games and the way that those ended, I think there's even an element to that of that it's, you can take confidence out of that.
Yeah.
Hey, we let it get away from us, but we got it back.
We still won.
We got it back on track. We shut it down, and I think we talked about this earlier this week where, there's momentum swings over the course of a playoff game, a playoff series. There's a lot of emotion that's involved. And to see that this group is able to handle those types of swings and still get the focus back on track and come away with the result that they want. In the playoffs, they don't care how you get them as long as you get to 16. Doesn't matter how the wins come. So I do just think that there's so much what they're doing right now that even the bad stuff, they're finding ways to pull confidence and learning lessons out of.
I'm going to be dramatic for a second.
Do it.
In comparing them to the 2022 team, I think it is fair to say the 2022 team was pretty hard to beat for any team
Anybody,
around the
yes.
league, no matter the year. But goaltending. Darcy Kemper, Pavel Francouz. Amazing. They get the job done, especially Pavel Francouz in the Western Conference Final. I think Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood are better as a tandem. And I think that's a sneaky strength of this team that maybe doesn't get factored in the equation when we're comparing the two. I still come away feeling like the 2022 team is better overall. But I even look at the depth that's waiting in the wings for the forward side of things. And to have two bona fide full-time NHLers in VC and Wood as potentially the guys out, or Kiviranta, I think that's kind of the mix that we're dealing with here. It's really interesting. I think it's still not maybe as black and white as we'd like to think it is.
Well, and I was texting with Evan Rawell last night about some of this, and we need to wait to see what happens in the postseason.
No, I'm just kidding.
Before we compare, because like you, I'm pretty confident in saying that the 2022, I just think really highly of that team from a couple years ago, and not only what they were able to accomplish, but the way they went about it. They lost 4 games over the course of the entire playoffs. They swept the Western Conference Final. Even the Stanley Cup Final never felt in question. They hung 7 goals on Andrei Vasilevsky, who I think people are going to hate. I think he's the best goalie that's ever played.
Oh, I was so scared with how you were going to finish that sentence.
No. I think extremely highly of Andrei Vasilevsky. And just, the fact that he tells Jared Bednar in the handshake line after, I did everything I could and you guys were too much. That's such an unbelievable compliment. That all said, let's see what this group does. Let's see how deep they go. If they were to do it and go all the way and, bring the cup back to Denver, how does that look? Before you can really compare the two teams. But I don't know if I'm ready to say that this tandem is better than that tandem from a couple years ago. But what I will say is this tandem feels like it was modeled off of that tandem from a couple years ago where they said, look, we have a clear number one. This isn't a 1A, 1B. We have a clear number one. Last couple years ago, it was Darcy Kemper. This year, it's Mackenzie Blackwood. But you've got a backup goaltender, both in Pavel Francouz a couple years ago and now Scott Wedgwood this year, that would be starters on probably 5 to 10 teams in the league, give or take, depending on the situation. That there's plenty of teams that would take Scott Wedgwood 50 nights a year. There were teams that were willing to give Pavel Francouz money to come be a guy who played 50 to 60 times a year. And I think the Avs have built this same tandem. So, like I said, I'm not ready to say that they're the better tandem yet, but I think you are right in that this duo has the opportunity to come away with that title of, no, this is the most dominant tandem that this organization has ever had.
I'm also underestimating the Landeskog of it all with the 2022 team.
Yeah.
Having a Landeskog, your captain, and just the impact as a player is a little hard to replenish. And then, of course, the success of Nassim Kadri. Brock Nelson's amazing. I think that he can play a similar, though different player, type of role. But even still, big shoes to fill in both those two things. That makes it still a hard conversation to have definitively.
Yeah.
But I at least want to see them get a fair shake of things, right?
Yeah.
I don't want there to be something that is out of their control, like losing a Val Nichushkin, but even just a weird injury
Yeah.
that takes what
Like
appears
breaking your sternum.
like breaking your sternum. Poor Sammy.
That was
Gee.
brutal.
And so I just want to see a real good look at things. It doesn't have to be perfect the whole way because that's not very realistic either. It wasn't even perfect the whole way for the 2022 team.
No.
So I don't need perfection. I just want a real honest look at this team in the playoffs without some crazy circumstance that just kind of rules them out.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. It's hard to even accurately assess the last 2 playoff runs for this group because of what's happened. Megan, I think that's more or less all I've got. There was one other thing that I was going to add there. The Gabe Landeskog. That's the other part that you and I didn't include, when talking about the lines and the depth, just because we still don't know. But Gabe Landeskog did skate again today. If you add him back into the fold on this group, that's when this becomes a different conversation entirely about how good and how deep this team can be.
I think people too have a very fair question and counter to that of what does he return as? Can he even be anything close to the player that we once knew? And it's a fair question.
Totally.
But I think if you're just even measuring the impact he brings in the locker room when he's battling alongside his teammates, that has extreme value that has to be factored into. I hope that he comes back and is even a shadow, the player that he once was. And even without knowing what that looks like, I feel a lot of confidence around the value that he adds, just being able to get back out on the ice and battle with his teammates again.
Well, and even like 75 to 80% Gabe Landeskog, with all due respect to the players that we've spoken very highly of in the bottom part of the lineup right now, like that's an upgrade. And so, no, I'm not expecting if Gabe Landeskog comes back, I'm not expecting him to plug into the top 6 and be that same presence he was 2 years ago. But I definitely think that he would have an impact, not only in the way that you're talking about just being there, but, being able to roll out a 4th line with Gabe Landeskog on it, yeah, he'll take that.
Doesn't it feel like they're just saving that spot on the wing for him?
Sure does.
With the 3rd line?
Sure does. But we'll see. And I just think that like I said, that if you get into that room, it's a different conversation entirely.
You're right. They have to beat St. Louis tomorrow.
Yep.
It's a big test. They came out of the break, played a bad game on the second leg of a back-to-back in St. Louis, okay? We all know what it was. We don't need to rehash it. St. Louis has won 8 straight. They're a wild card team trying to solidify their wild card spot. They're going to be hungry. And it's the measuring stick games this time of year, too. They know what the Avs are and how everybody's talking about them right now. It's going to be a weird game, an afternoon game, but it's important for the Avs to match that intensity, too. I think that's what was lacking in the St. Louis game that they played coming out of the break for understandable reason. Well, now they have a chance to answer for that and respond in a big way.
No, you're totally right. And St. Louis, and again, we can talk more about it later, but they're such a weird team to me. They do this, it seems like this is just becoming a normal
Jim
thing.
Montgomery coach team.
Where they just, that's what changed this year. So I guess for the Blues to be any good is they've got to fire their coach halfway through the season.
I think it's very specific to Monty.
Well, 2019, they fired their coach, brought in Craig Berube, and went from last in the league in January to winning the Cup.
Yes.
And they just have these weird late season surges now.
But I also think this is very specific to Monty.
What's happening this year?
Yes.
Yeah. No,
I'm just trying to
I'm just being tongue-in-cheek.
for Monty here, and you're ruining it.
No, I'm sorry. You're totally right.
He was actually an assistant behind the St. Louis Blues bench a couple seasons back, too. Monty has ties to St. Louis
Blues,
previously,
yeah.
so maybe, I don't know if he was there the Berube year or not.
I don't know.
So maybe he was still the secret weapon the whole
That's
time.
right. That's
what
right.
I'm trying to say.
No, I think that's fair. Will be a big one tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon, 2:30. Weird start time, but we'll be there. As we sign off, I got to give a huge shout out to the folks behind the camera today. You guys can't really see it on camera. The setup that they built for us here is absolutely outstanding. We have some content that'll be coming early part of next week that we think you guys are just going to love. We're really excited to share that with you. But big shout out to Mark and John. You guys hear us talk about all the time. But the way they take care of us here at Gorilla is second to none. nobody else can touch the people that we've got working behind the scenes here, Megan. So big shout out to them. That's going to do it. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. Mark and John behind the proverbial glass today. Game tomorrow. Expecting an off day Sunday, but then we'll be right back at it on Monday. But we'll have all your regular game day content coming your guys' way tomorrow. Thanks so much for hanging out. Get outside. Enjoy the weather. Have a great Friday. Everyone stay safe. For Megan, I'm Jesse. Take it easy, guys.